She leaned against the padded bench, catching her breath, but her eyes never really left mine. That was the first thing I noticed when I agreed to help her with her workouts. The way she held eye contact longer than most people dared. My mom's friend, a woman in her mid-40s, moved with a kind of grace that didn't come from the gym, but from the way she carried herself through life. Every gesture was deliberate, practiced, but every so often something slipped through, a glance, a pause, that felt like it wasn't meant for anyone to see. I told myself I was just here to help, that spotting her at the gym was just a favor. But then her hand brushed mine while passing me the water bottle, and I forgot whatever excuse I'd made. Her skin was warm, soft, the kind of touch that lingered long after it was gone. Too much weight? I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out lower, closer. She shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. No, just distracted. Distracted. She didn't explain, and I didn't ask. That was our rhythm. Half sentences, unfinished thoughts, pauses that meant more than words. The gym was nearly empty. Just the dull hum of a ceiling fan, the faint clink of weights in the background, and her steady breathing. The late afternoon light cut across the room, softening everything. It felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of us. She bent forward for her next set of curls, and I moved closer, spotting her without touching. But the space between us was charged, alive. I could smell the faint trace of her perfume mixing with the salt of her skin. When she exhaled, I felt the warmth brush my chest. Keep your wrists steady, I said quietly, adjusting her form with a light tap of my finger. The moment my skin met hers again, she froze, just for a second, then continued as if nothing had happened. But something had. Her voice dropped when she answered. I'll try. It was softer than before, carrying something heavier underneath. I found myself studying her, not the way she lifted, but the way she bit her lip when she struggled, the way her hair slipped loose from its tie, brushing against her cheek. She caught me staring once, and instead of looking away, she held my gaze, eyes steady, almost daring me to look deeper. Don't get too close, she teased, though her tone wavered. You'll make me nervous. I laughed quietly, though it wasn't really funny. My hands flexed at my sides, wanting to close the space but staying still. Maybe that's the point. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her lips parted as if she had something to say back, but she didn't. Instead, silence stretched between us, heavier than the weights she had been lifting. Her chest rose and fell faster, not just from the workout. She set the dumbbells down with a soft thud, her hand brushing against mine again, this time deliberate, slow. Then she leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. I need you more than the workout. The air cracked between us, the sentence hanging there like a secret we weren't supposed to speak. My breath caught, my body tensed. Before I could answer, the gym door swung open. A man's voice called out casually, still here. She stepped back quickly, her hand slipping from mine, her eyes darting toward the door. But just before she turned away, she gave me one last look, sharp, unspoken, unfinished. And in that glance, I knew this was only the beginning. The door had barely shut behind the man when she exhaled, a small laugh escaping her, though it sounded nothing like amusement. She reached for her towel, patting her forehead, buying time. I stood there, unsure whether to speak or to let the moment dissolve into silence. You'd think at my age I wouldn't care what people think, she murmured, half to herself. I tilted my head, pretending not to notice the crack in her voice. You don't look like someone who worries much. Her lips curved faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's because I've had practice. There it was, the guardedness. I'd seen it before, in the way she carried herself at family gatherings. Always smiling, always controlled. But here, in the quiet hum of the nearly empty gym, the polish slipped. She tossed the towel aside and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. I've been through enough to know certain things don't end well. She didn't spell it out, but her glance at me was enough. I nodded slowly, though my chest tightened. The age difference hung between us like a weight neither of us wanted to lift. I was 23. She was my mom's friend, divorced for years, always polite, always just out of reach. But in moments like this, when she stood so close that I could smell the faint trace of her perfume. Vanilla, warm, familiar. It didn't feel like distance at all. I adjusted the dumbbells, trying to focus, though my eyes kept betraying me. The way her hair stuck slightly to her neck with sweat. The line of her collarbone, sharp under the dim light. I turned away too quickly, hoping she hadn't noticed. She did. I could feel her smile on the pause before she spoke. "You're quieter today." "Just thinking." "About what?" she asked, stepping closer, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine when she leaned down to grab her water. I swallowed, the air tightening. "About form," I lied, but my voice betrayed me. Her hand lingered on my shoulder longer than necessary as she straightened. "Good," she said softly. "Keep me steady." The pressure of her palm stayed, even after she let go. I wanted to tell her she didn't need the workout, that she looked stronger than anyone I knew, but instead I bit my tongue. Words weren't safe here. For a moment, silence wrapped around us again, broken only by the hum of the fan and the distant rattle of weights someone had left stacked wrong. She sipped from her bottle, eyes watching me over the rim, steady, unblinking. I finally forced myself to meet her gaze. Something flickered there, loneliness, maybe, or a challenge. I couldn't tell. Then she moved, almost imperceptibly, brushing a strand of hair back from her face. But her hand grazed my arm in the motion, light, deliberate. My skin burned under the touch, though neither of us said a word. We stood there, too close, not speaking, not moving, until finally, she whispered, "You don't even realize, do you?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. And still, she didn't step away. The gym was emptier than usual, the late hour casting shadows across the mirrors. She was the last one on the treadmill, walking slowly, head tilted toward me as if we'd slipped into a private world. I stood beside her, pretending to check the settings. In truth, I was memorizing the curve of her jawline, the way her lips parted slightly as she breathed. "Slow night," she said, her voice soft, almost conspiratorial. "Yeah," I murmured. "Just us." That truth pressed against me, heavier than any weight in the room. The sound of her steps slowed. When the treadmill stopped, she hopped down, brushing past me. Her arm grazed my side, a touch so slight it shouldn't have mattered. But it did. She reached for her phone on the bench. The screen lit up, and her lips pressed together tightly. A man's name flashed across the message. "Are you still out?" She locked it quickly, slipping the phone face down. "Someone waiting on you?" I asked, careful, almost too casual. Her laugh was thin. "Not in the way you think." The answer stirred something in me. Curiosity, jealousy, maybe both. I stepped closer without realizing, until her back nearly brushed the mirror. Her breath caught. "You're standing awfully close." I didn't move. Neither did she. The hum of the ceiling fan grew louder, the world narrowing to just her eyes holding mine. My heart hammered, the beat uneven, reckless. Then the door clicked. Voices spilled in, two people chatting, laughing as they passed through to the locker room. She shifted instantly, her shoulder brushing mine as she stepped sideways, forcing a polite distance. My skin tingled where her body had been. We both waited, frozen, until the voices faded. The silence afterward felt even heavier. "You see," she whispered, "it's not just about us. People talk. They always talk." Her words carried guilt, but her body betrayed her. She leaned in just enough that her perfume filled the air between us. Vanilla, warm, intoxicating. I lowered my voice. "Then why are you still here?" Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Instead, her hand lifted slightly, as if to touch me, before falling back to her side. The hesitation stung worse than a refusal. We stood there in half-light, the tension stretching tighter with every second. I thought about leaning in, about closing the space, just an inch, maybe less. Her eyes flicked to my mouth, then back to my eyes. It was the smallest movement, but it set my pulse racing. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay still, even as every part of me screamed to close the distance. Finally, she exhaled a shaky sound and whispered, "This can't happen." But even as she said it, she didn't step away, and neither did I. The next time we met, the gym was practically dark, The overhead lights dimmed except for the corner where we stood. It felt more like a secret than a workout. She adjusted the strap of her tank top, her fingers trembling slightly. I caught it, the slip in her composure. She wasn't as untouchable as she pretended. "You've been avoiding me," I said quietly. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. "I thought that's what you wanted." "No." I answered too quickly, my voice lower than I intended. The silence stretched. She leaned against the wall, folding her arms, but the gesture didn't hide her. It only made her look more vulnerable, framed in the soft light. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I've made mistakes before. And if we," her voice broke. She didn't finish. I stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "Then don't call it a mistake." She shook her head, but her body didn't move away. My hand lifted almost on its own, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Her breath hitched, and when I tucked the strand gently behind her ear, my fingers lingered against her skin. "Warm. Silken." "You shouldn't," she said, though the protest sounded thin, fragile. "Neither should you," I murmured, close enough that my words brushed her cheek. Her eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened, the guardedness was gone. What was left was raw, longing, fear, hunger. She leaned forward just enough that her forehead nearly touched my chest. I froze, feeling the weight of her against me, light yet impossible to ignore. Her hands hovered at my sides, trembling, like she was 1 second away from pulling me closer. "I can't stop thinking about you," I confessed before I could hold it back. The words came out rough, desperate. Her eyes widened. She drew in a sharp breath, then let it out slowly, almost like surrender. "You're too young," she whispered, but the words lacked conviction. My hand slid down her arm, feeling the fine tremor in her muscles, until I reached her wrist. I held it gently, not pulling, just enough to say I'm here. She looked up at me then, really looked, and something inside both of us broke. Her lips parted. My heart pounded. Every sound in the room faded, leaving only her breathing and mine. She leaned in, tilting her face toward mine, her hand finally resting on my chest, fingers curling against the fabric of my shirt. The world shrank to that single point, her mouth inches from mine, the heat of her breath mixing with mine. Then, the sound of a phone buzzing shattered the moment. Her phone, lighting up on the bench again. She froze, her lips still dangerously close to mine, eyes locked on me with panic and something deeper, a choice hanging in the air. And then she whispered, voice trembling, "If I kiss you now, there's no turning back." Her phone buzzed again. She didn't move to answer, but I saw the name flash across the screen before it dimmed. Mom. My mom. The air left my lungs. She turned the phone face down, slow, careful, like she already knew I'd seen. Her eyes flicked up to mine, wide, caught between apology and something harder. "You didn't tell me," I said quietly. My voice was low, but I could hear the edge in it. She swallowed, her throat working. She asked me to keep it quiet. I didn't think it mattered. Didn't matter? My chest tightened, and I stepped back, though the space felt colder instantly. "It matters." She followed me, almost without realizing, closing the gap I'd tried to create. Her hand brushed my arm as she reached for me, and the touch made my pulse spike, even as my mind spun. "Listen to me," she whispered, her fingers curling lightly against my sleeve. "I never planned this. I never wanted it to go this far." Her words were steady, but her body betrayed her. Her breathing uneven, her hand trembling against me. The nearness of her contradicted every excuse. "Then why can't you stop?" I asked, softer now, the heat of frustration fading into something rawer. Her lips parted, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked away, biting her lip, that small, nervous habit I'd noticed 100 times. I wanted to reach for her, to tilt her face back toward me, but the truth hanging between us held me frozen. Finally, she whispered, "Because you look at me like no one else does. And I'm afraid of what that means." The words struck harder than any revelation. I could feel the sting of truth, hers and mine. My hands flexed at my sides, itching to close the distance again, to anchor her before she slipped away. The silence grew unbearable. I shifted forward, close enough that her shoulder brushed my chest as she turned slightly. She gasped at the contact, her body stiffening, then softening as if against her will. "You think I don't feel guilty?" she breathed, her voice trembling. "Every time you touch me, I wonder how I'll face her. But every time you walk away." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "I don't want you to." Her confession hung in the air, raw and unpolished. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I found myself leaning in, unable to stop. My hand lifted to her jaw, thumb grazing her cheek. She shivered beneath the touch, her eyes fluttering shut. But before our lips could meet, she pulled back sharply, pressing her hand to my chest. "Not here. Not like this." The words didn't sound like rejection. They sounded like surrender postponed. Her eyes locked on mine, desperate and certain all at once. Then she whispered, "Come tomorrow. Same time. No excuses." And just like that, the decision was made, dangerous, inevitable. The next evening, I found her already waiting. She stood near the far wall of the gym, arms folded, eyes on the floor. The place was nearly deserted, just the low hum of the fan and the faint echo of footsteps from the other side of the building. When she looked up, I saw it. The same conflict in her eyes as in mine. Hunger and hesitation woven tight together. "You came," she said softly. "You asked me to." She smiled faintly, but it vanished almost instantly. Her hands rubbed against her arms like she was cold, though the room was warm. "I don't know if I can do this." I stepped closer, slow, careful. "Then tell me to leave." Her breath caught, her chest rising unevenly. She didn't move. I closed the last few inches until I could feel the heat radiating off her. My hand hovered near her hip, not touching, but close enough that it made the space between us electric. "You make it sound so easy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's not," I admitted. "I've tried to stop. I can't." Her eyes searched mine, desperate, like she was looking for a reason to step back. But then my hand brushed her arm, feather-light, and she shivered. The sound she made, soft, unguarded, broke something open inside me. She pressed her palm against my chest, right over my heartbeat. I knew she could feel it racing. Her other hand lifted, almost without thought, to trace the line of my jaw. "This is wrong," she breathed. "Then why does it feel like the only thing that's right?" I answered, my voice low, rough. For a long, suspended second, neither of us moved. Just the air thick with unspoken want, her breath mingling with mine, the world shrinking to the point where our lips hovered a whisper apart. Her eyes fluttered shut, and then I kissed her. It wasn't careful, not rehearsed or measured. It was messy, desperate, real. Her hand curled into my shirt, pulling me closer. My fingers tangled in her hair, and she leaned into me like she'd been waiting years for this. When we finally pulled back, both of us breathless, she rested her forehead against mine. Her eyes glistened, but she wasn't smiling. "I can't undo this now," she whispered. "Neither can I." We stood there, holding on like the moment might collapse if we let go. Then, softer, steadier, she said, "Whatever happens after this, at least I know I wasn't alone. You see me." And in that moment, I understood. The risk, the guilt, the fear, none of it mattered as much as this. That she had let me in, and I had chosen not to turn away. For the first time, everything was clear. The gym lights were dimmed now, the last of the staff already gone. The hum of the fan was the only sound, steady and soft, like it was giving us permission to stay a little longer. She sat on the bench, shoulders slumped, towel draped loosely in her lap. I stood in front of her, hands in my pockets, unsure if stepping closer would be too much or if stepping back would feel like abandonment. Finally, she broke the silence. "Do you realize what this means?" I nodded slowly. "That we crossed a line." Her laugh was soft, but shaky. "That we dared to. And we can't go back." She looked up at me then, her eyes tired but shining with something I hadn't seen before. Relief. Vulnerability. The mask she always wore at family gatherings, at dinners, at every polite interaction, was gone. What was left was just her. I stepped forward, close enough that my knees brushed hers. She didn't move away. Instead, she reached for my hand, tentative at first, then steady, threading her fingers through mine. The warmth of her palm grounded me, made everything real. People will talk, she whispered. Your mom, everyone. Let them, I said quietly. I'd rather have this, even for a moment, than spend my life wondering what it could have been. Her breath caught, and I saw her lips tremble before she pressed them into a faint smile. She tugged gently on my hand, pulling me closer until I was standing between her knees. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against my chest. You'll regret this someday, she murmured. I shook my head, letting my chin rest lightly on her hair. No, the only thing I'd regret is walking away tonight. We stayed like that for a long time. No words, no excuses. Just her breath against me, my hand rubbing slow circles against her back, the kind of closeness that didn't need to be hidden anymore. When she finally looked up, her face was inches from mine, her eyes steady, searching. I kissed her forehead, lingering there, and felt her sigh into me. It wasn't about desire anymore, not just. It was about comfort, about finally being seen, about choosing each other despite everything. She whispered, then we're in this together. And I answered the only way I knew how, by tightening my grip on her hand, by staying. We didn't need grand promises or perfect words, just the quiet certainty that, whatever came next, we wouldn't face it alone. Sparkles, did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? 2.